Anna's life was made of repeated gestures. She woke up before the sun each day, put the kettle on the stove, pinned up her hair in the bathroom mirror, and walked through the still sleeping streets of her neighborhood. Her steps were steady, but her eyes revealed the tiredness of someone who had lost too much and kept walking anyway. She had worked at the same little cafe for over 8 years, a small, old place, tucked into a quiet corner of the city, far from luxury or glamour. The walls were gently cracked, the floor creaked in certain spots, but there was a warmth there that modern cafes couldn't imitate. Anna was known for her gentle smile and her respectful silence. She served each customer like they were the only one, looked them in the eye, listened without rush, always handed the coffee with a soft "good morning" that felt like a hug. But what no one knew was that smile was learned. On the inside, Anna was a field of silent battles. She carried the memory of a broken marriage, promises that turned to absence, a son taken too soon, and a faith that held on only because she still believed God saw what others ignored. She didn't seek recognition. She only wanted to work in peace and forget that her heart still hurt. And then he showed up, Daniel. He arrived on a gray morning with a fine drizzle falling. He sat in the most discreet corner of the cafe, ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and stared out the window for a long while. He wore a plain shirt, worn jeans, and a jacket that had seen better days. He didn't draw attention, but there was something in his eyes, something that spoke of unnamed losses, of weariness the body couldn't explain. Anna served him like she served everyone else, with delicacy, without intrusion, a quiet, "Here you go," and then silence. And in that silence, something began. Daniel came back the next day, and the next, and then, every day, always at the same time, always in the same seat, always the same order. He watched. Anna served. Their eyes met, and even though not a word was spoken, something stirred between them, something strange, familiar, like they had met in another life, or maybe in another wound. Daniel didn't want to be noticed, but Anna saw him, not for what he looked like, but for what he was hiding. What she didn't know was that the man who ordered coffee so simply was, in truth, the owner of one of the country's largest business empires, a millionaire, tired of being flattered, tired of hidden agendas, tired of people seeing a number instead of a man. Daniel had everything the world admired, except peace. After the sudden death of his mother, his closest bond, he began to question it all. The fancy dinners, the luxury trips, the fake applause. He felt suffocated, empty, alone. And in an impulse he couldn't explain, he walked into that cafe, maybe searching for refuge, maybe trying to forget who he was, or remember who he used to be. And there, among the scent of fresh cheese bread and the muffled sound of an old radio, he found something money had never given him. Welcome, not for what he had, but for who he was. And Anna, without knowing, was serving more than coffee. She was serving presence. She was serving faith. Time passed. They continued their quiet exchange of glances and silence, but something inside them began to shift. Anna wondered who that man was. Those sad eyes, those restrained gestures. Daniel, in turn, felt a strange peace there, as if for a few minutes each day, he could simply be a man, without titles, without fortune, without masks. And through that simple routine, one cup at a time, God was quietly setting the stage for a new beginning. Because sometimes he uses the most ordinary things, like a forgotten cafe, to reignite hopes that seemed long gone. Anna had no idea she was warming more than coffee. She was warming a heart as wounded as hers, ready to begin again. Anna was a quiet presence in the neighborhood where she lived and worked. Known for her gentle service and soft demeanor, few knew the pain she hid behind that light blue apron and always tied-up hair. Her smile was a habit, a courtesy, but deep inside, there were stories no one could see. The cafe where she worked stood on a cobbled street lined with crooked trees, like the people who walked there, shaped by time and struggle. It was an old place, untouched by modern sparkle, but embraced by those who needed stillness and warmth. Anna always arrived before anyone else. She liked to prepare things in silence, at her pace, with care. She wiped down the counters, lit the stove, opened the windows just enough to let the morning in, and while doing all this she prayed quietly, sometimes asking for strength, sometimes simply grateful for another chance to try. She didn't talk much about her life, but anyone watching closely would notice in her eyes a quiet ache, and a heaviness that didn't come from her body, but from her soul. Her past was made of half-healed wounds. A marriage that ended not in shouting, but in slow silence. A husband who had drifted away one gesture at a time, until there was nothing left. When he left with someone younger, he didn't just take clothes from the closet. He took her trust, and part of her hope. Anna tried to move on, never complained, never spoke badly of him. But after that, she stopped expecting much. From people, from life. The cafe became her refuge, a place where she still felt useful, where no one judged her, where the days passed slowly, and that, in her world, was a gift. Because when life moves slowly, pain doesn't push as hard. Customers came and went. Some were kind, others indifferent, but Anna treated everyone the same, with respect, with kindness, as if she still believed the world could be better, even if not for her. She remembered each regular's name, their preferences, who liked black coffee, who wanted tea, who came for the cornbread. Little details she remembered, not out of duty, but care. That's how she loved now, in details, in silences. But what no one knew was that at the end of her shift, after locking the cafe and walking home, Anna would take off her shoes before even stepping inside, and cry softly, sitting on her worn-out couch. Not dramatic tears, quiet ones. Like everything else in her, she cried for the absence of someone asking how her day had been, for the lack of an unexpected hug, for the time that passed and never came back. She cried for still missing someone, even knowing she shouldn't. And the next morning she'd wake early again, put on the apron, tie up her hair, and return to the cafe, smiling, even with a broken heart. Daniel had arrived the way people do when they're afraid of being seen, quietly. No one noticed the first time he walked into the cafe. The old wooden door let out its usual soft creak. Anna was turned away, drying a cup. When she looked up, she saw just a man. Slightly tired face, eyes avoiding contact, clothes plain and unremarkable. He walked to the last table, tucked into a corner where the sunlight barely reached, sat down slowly, like someone carrying a weight no one else could see. Then, he ordered only a plain black coffee. Anna served it as she always did, with gentleness, without intrusion, a small, respectful gesture, and silence. And it was in that silence that something began. He came back the next day, and the next, always at the same time, always to the same seat, always with the same order. It was as if that small ritual helped him hold on to something, or maybe let something go. The other staff barely noticed. Just another quiet man passing through. But Anna saw more. She noticed how he held the cup with both hands, like he was trying to warm something inside that had long since gone cold. She noticed his gaze, always fixed on the window, like he was searching for someone who'd never return. She noticed his silence, not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind, the kind that hides stories. And there was something about this man, something that made Anna feel seen, even without being looked at, because she too knew what it felt like to long for something no one else understood. She too had smiled on the outside while breaking inside. She too had walked into places hoping only to feel a bit of peace, even if just for a moment. And as the days went by, Anna couldn't help but wonder who he was, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. Because without exchanging a word she felt it. He understood something she had carried for years. Daniel on his side had begun to notice her as well, the way she moved, even when the cafe was full, the way she wiped the tables, arranged the cutlery, offered coffee with a tired but honest smile. He saw the tenderness in her gestures, the calm in her voice, and most of all, the lack of judgment. Here, no one asked who he was. No one asked where he came from. No one cared what he owned. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like everything. Because what no one knew was that Daniel was running from excess, from noise, from a life he'd built but no longer recognized. He had everything, Companies, houses, cars, travel. He had status, and a loneliness applause could never fix. His mother had passed just months before. A simple woman, firm in faith, who always told him, "To love truly is to serve. If you want to be loved, you must first see others." After she left, Daniel began to see the world through different eyes, and what he saw frightened him. He realized he was admired, but not loved, surrounded, but alone, respected, but not understood. So, one day, without much thought, he walked into that cafe. He didn't know what he was looking for, but deep down, God already knew what he needed to find, and he found it. Not in luxury, not in speeches, not in meetings, but in a simple woman, with a soft gaze and steady steps, who served him coffee, as if serving dignity. And in that small gesture, something inside him began to heal. Daniel had grown up surrounded by everything most people spend their lives trying to achieve. The only son of a visionary businessman and a deeply spiritual mother. His childhood was comfortable, but lonely. From a young age, he learned to walk among the powerful, to speak with confidence, to hold a posture of control. But inside there was always a restlessness no one understood, not even him. When he inherited the family business, everyone expected him to soar, and he did. He turned modest companies into major empires, multiplied profits, expanded his reach. At high-end dinners he was celebrated, in meetings respected, online admired, but at home, only silence. Slowly, Daniel began to notice how much of his life was built on appearances. Relationships felt like unspoken contracts. Hugs came with conditions. Smiles were often masks. He missed something he didn't even know how to name, until his mother passed away. The woman who had always taught him the value of invisible things, like kindness, humility, and faith, left this world with a whisper of peace and one final sentence. "Don't forget what truly matters, my son." Those words echoed like a bell inside him. Daniel began to look around, and what he saw frightened him. His achievements were real, but so was the emptiness. His success was undeniable, but so was his loneliness. So he disappeared for a while, took one of the simplest cars from the garage, dressed in clothes that didn't reveal who he was, and drove off with no destination. He needed to breathe, to see the world differently, to perhaps be someone no one recognized. And then, on a gray morning, he walked into that cafe. It was like stepping into another world. No one handed him a business card. No one tried to impress him. No one forced conversation. He was greeted only with a sincere, "Good morning," and a warm cup of coffee. In that small gesture, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. He came back the next day, and again. The routine became a need, because in that small space between the clinking of cups and the soft smell of baked bread, Daniel found something his fortune had never bought: honesty. He started noticing things he'd overlooked for years. The way Anna treated every customer equally, the care in the details, the quiet respect she offered each moment, and, most of all, the absence of judgment. For the first time in years, he felt seen, but not examined. Daniel never craved flattery. He had always known many around him were there out of convenience, but seeing someone like Anna, who treated him with dignity without knowing who he was, deeply moved him. She had no idea that the man sitting in the corner was the owner of several towers across the city, that he held stocks in major tech firms, had investments across continents, homes in places she'd never dreamed of visiting, and he made sure it stayed that way, not out of shame, but out of longing. Longing to be loved as a man, not a brand, not a bank account. Over time, he realized he wasn't the only one walking around with a patched-up heart. Anna had her own hidden pains. In her eyes, he saw the same quiet grief he carried, the same exhaustion, the same fragile hope trying to survive, even after everything. And so, day after day, with each cup of coffee and quiet moment shared, Daniel found something rare in that tiny cafe. No one knew his full name there, and yet, that's where he felt the most whole. Time passed in the way that ordinary days do, quietly, and amid the routine, something began to bloom, slowly, like the things that don't rush because they're meant to last. Anna and Daniel were in no rush. For weeks, they exchanged only gestures, a soft, Good morning here. A quiet, see you tomorrow there. But something lingered in the air. Something that escaped words and lived in glances. One day, it was Anna who spoke first. She asked if he'd like to try the fresh corn cake that had just come out of the oven. He accepted with a slight, almost shy smile. And right there, over a warm slice and a quiet sip of coffee, the first real conversation began. Nothing grand. No deep revelations. Just small talk about the weather, the smell of bread, the noise from construction outside. But for those who've lived behind emotional walls, any honest exchange is a quiet earthquake. Daniel answered kindly. And for the first time, he called her by name. Anna blinked, surprised. She didn't remember telling him. He smiled. It's on your name tag. She smiled back, truly this time. From that day on, their silences turned into words. Little by little, they started to share stories. About childhood, favorite foods, simple memories. Anna spoke about her grandmother who taught her to brew coffee using a cloth filter. Daniel spoke of mornings on his mother's farm, picking fruit barefoot, running through the fields. She listened more than she spoke, but when she did, her eyes shone with a light time had not dimmed. And Daniel listened. Attentively, genuinely, something he hadn't experienced in a long time, surrounded by fast-talking, fast-living people. With time, Anna opened up a little more. She talked about her marriage, how it ended in slow silence, about the pain of watching someone she loved become a stranger, about the nights she cried alone in the bathroom just to keep her dignity. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't offer pre-made solutions. He didn't rush to fix it. He simply stayed, present, listening. Then something unexpected happened. She began to ask about him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he started to answer. He spoke vaguely at first, said he was going through a time of reevaluation, that he had lost someone important, that he needed silence to put his soul back in order. He didn't share details, and Anna didn't demand any. She knew that some pains need time before they can turn into words. Their bond grew like the roots of an old tree, hidden from sight but strong beneath the surface. There were no declarations, no dramatic gestures, just presence. And when presence is sincere, it's worth more than 1,000 promises. Sometimes Anna would catch him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. When she noticed, he'd quickly look away, with a shy smile that betrayed more than he meant to say. Other times she found herself waiting for the sound of the door opening, the footsteps toward that same corner table, the same coffee order, and her heart beating just a little faster without warning. But deep down, she knew the reason, even if she wasn't ready to say it out loud. And Daniel, he began to wish the minutes in that cafe would last longer, that the coffee would stay warm just a little more, that Anna would tell one more story, that time would pause, just there. Because in that little universe made of old curtains and coffee steam, he had discovered something precious. The truth lives in the simple things. And Anna was the most beautiful simplicity he had ever known. It was a morning like any other, one of those when the wind feels slower and the sky forgets to shine. The cafe followed its usual rhythm, the scent of coffee filling the air, cups clinking on trays, and Anna, as always, moving gracefully from table to table with quiet precision. Daniel was already there, sitting in his usual corner, watching without seeming to. He knew the sound of Anna's steps, the way she adjusted the cloth on her shoulder, the subtle gesture she made to tuck her hair behind her ear when she felt anxious. But something about her seemed different that day. Her eyes were duller, her movements less firm. She still smiled, like always, but there was a new weight in her expression, the kind that lingers after a restless night. The night before, she'd received a letter from her ex-husband. A financial demand out of nowhere stirred wounds she thought she'd buried. After all those years, he still reached out, only to remind her how alone she had been, not through words, but through indifference, through silence. Still, she did what she always did, kept it to herself, put on her apron, tied her hair, and faced the day, because that's what she knew, how to move forward, even when broken. The cafe slowly filled. Regulars, kids asking for juice, couples splitting cheese bread. Anna did everything with her usual grace, but Daniel saw it. She was holding herself together. Then, he walked in. A man Anna didn't know. Crumpled suit, impatient air. He sat without greeting anyone, tapped his fingers on the table and barked his order. Anna replied kindly as always, but he didn't like the weight, nor the size of the cup, nor the look of the bread, though he hadn't even tasted it. And suddenly, he snapped. "Can't you hear? I've asked 3 times already. Is it really that hard to do your job?" The cafe fell silent. Some customers paused mid-bite. The ambient music seemed to fade. Anna stood still, holding a cup. She tried to breathe, but he kept going, mocking. "Look at you, standing there like someone who never got anything right in life. Is this it? Serving coffee to people you'll never measure up to?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than anything, but it was a silence that hurt. Her face didn't twist in anger, it just shut down, like someone hearing something they've heard too many times before. Someone reliving every time they were treated like they didn't matter. Daniel stood up, quietly. Anna walked to the counter, set the tray down, removed her apron, carefully, as if not to let herself fall apart, and slipped into the back room. There, between bags of flour and cleaning supplies, she sat on the floor, rested her head on her knees, and cried, not loudly, quietly, like always. She cried for the man's words, for the letter the night before, for the past, for the loneliness, for the constant effort to stay strong when the world keeps trying to crush her. Then, Daniel appeared. He passed through the back door silently, stopped at the threshold, watched her for a moment, and said nothing. She noticed him, quickly tried to compose herself, wiped her face with trembling hands. "I'm sorry. I just need a minute, okay?" But he didn't speak. He sat beside her on the cold floor, and stayed. They didn't talk, didn't touch, just stayed. The scent of coffee still lingered. The city buzzed faintly outside, and in that cramped storage room something changed. Daniel didn't try to fix anything, didn't minimize the pain, didn't say it would pass. He just stayed. And that simple act, meant more to Anna than any hug or speech, because he wasn't there to save her. He was there to honor her pain. After a few minutes, Daniel stood, looked at her with tenderness and said, "I'll handle things out there. You breathe. You deserve to breathe." Anna nodded, a small but real smile forming. For the first time in a long time, she felt protected. Daniel returned to the cafe, walked up to the still grumbling man at the counter. "You've been served. It's time for you to go." The man blinked. "And who are you to tell me that?" Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm someone who won't let dignity be trampled." The man scoffed, dropped a few coins on the table, and left. Life slowly resumed in the cafe, but nothing would be quite the same. Anna came back to work the next day. Didn't talk about what happened. She didn't have to. But something in her step had changed. And in Daniel's heart, something had settled too. Because that day, through tears and silence, they both discovered something vital. Some wounds are only healed by someone who chooses to stay. The days that followed were different, though neither of them said anything had changed. Anna returned to work with the same steady pace, but there was a quiet glow in her eyes, the echo of a presence that had stayed when everything else fell apart. Daniel in his corner seat seemed more at ease now, more grounded, like that shared silence had opened a new door between them. Their conversations grew more frequent, the smiles more natural, the glances longer. Then, one sunny afternoon, when the cafe had quieted down and the smell of cheese bread still lingered in the air, Daniel stayed until closing time. Anna was washing the last cups when she heard his voice, calm and certain. "Would you go out with me sometime?" She paused, turned slowly. Her heart began to race in a way it hadn't in years. "Go out? With you?" she repeated, needing to hear it again. Daniel smiled, a little shy. "Yes. Dinner, a walk, a conversation without a counter between us." Anna hesitated. She wanted to say yes, but a small voice inside still whispered fears. "I don't think I'm the kind of woman you're used to." Daniel took a step closer, his tone firm yet gentle. "You're the highest kind of woman I've ever met." The words hung in the air, and in that moment Anna knew it wasn't flattery. It was truth. It was recognition. It was love, disguised as courage. She took a breath, and with a soft, almost nervous smile replied, "Then, I think I can go out with you sometime." And that day came. Their first date was simple, like the two of them. A quiet dinner at a modest restaurant with a view of the stars. They talked about life, about pain, about starting over. They laughed at small things. They shared peaceful silences. Daniel didn't try to impress her with stories of power or wealth. He spoke of childhood, of his mother, of the fears he still carried. Anna didn't pretend to be light either. She spoke of her losses, her delayed dreams, the faith that held her together when everything else failed. It was unlike anything they'd ever experienced. No games, no performances, just two souls, recognizing each other. That night, walking side by side under the city's old street lamps, one thing became clear to both of them. This wasn't just a date. It was a reunion with something they had both been looking for, without knowing where to find it. Because sometimes you have to lose a lot to finally be ready for something real. What was forming between Anna and Daniel was more than romance. It was the meeting of two broken worlds that, for reasons only God understands, fit into each other's cracks. Their relationship had grown the way real things do, slowly but with strength. There were quiet walks, long conversations, shared laughter, no flashy promises, just presence and truth. Anna never asked what Daniel did for a living. He had vaguely mentioned he was rebuilding things, and she never pressed for more. Maybe because she was afraid of what she might learn, or maybe because deep down, she knew that when love is genuine, time will reveal what matters. But as the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the unspoken truth began to weigh heavily on Daniel's heart. For all the peace Anna gave him, he carried a secret. Not one rooted in betrayal, but in fear. Fear of losing something real. Fear of what would change once the whole truth was laid bare. Until one late afternoon, after a quiet walk under the amber light of sunset, sitting on a park bench, Daniel decided it was time. Anna, there's something I need to tell you. She looked at him calmly. Her eyes held no fear, only trust. He took a deep breath, ran his fingers through his hair, and said, I'm not just the man you met in that cafe. I own a network of companies. I have investments, partners, responsibilities, and a name you've probably heard on TV or in magazines. Anna went quiet. For a moment, even the breeze seemed to pause. He continued, I needed a place where I could just be a man, where people didn't look at me for what I have. And it was there, in that quiet corner of the world, that I found that peace, that I found you. She lowered her gaze. Her mind raced to make sense of it. Her heart tried to catch up, and deep inside, an old voice, the one that lives in every woman who's been hurt, began to shout, was he playing with my heart all along? She stood slowly, took a few steps away, as if needing air. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Her voice wasn't angry. It was wounded. Daniel rose too, came closer. Because I was scared of losing you. Because what we have is so rare. I feared that knowing everything might change how you see me. She looked into his eyes, and in them she saw honesty, but also the emptiness of someone who had carried too much alone. I'm not afraid of what you have, Daniel. I'm afraid of what I mean to you. I'm afraid I was just a breath of air in your storm. That word, afraid, pierced him deeper than anything. He tried to explain, told her he always meant to tell her, that his feelings were real, that he had never known love like this before. But Anna needed time to sit with her thoughts, time to discern what hurt more, the fact that he kept it from her, or the fear that she wasn't enough. That night she went home with a heavy chest, sat on her bed, couldn't even cry, because sometimes doubt hurts more than the truth. And Daniel, alone in his luxurious apartment, stared out the window and saw nothing, because for the first time the silence around him was louder than ever. He had everything, but without her, it all felt like nothing. Not much, but enough for the days to take on a rhythm, and for the bond between Anna and Daniel to grow deeper with every shared look, every quiet gesture, every honest silence. After the secret came the distance, then the silence, then the choice. Anna didn't push him away, but she didn't lean in too quickly either. She needed to see, to feel, to give time the chance to confirm what words alone couldn't prove. Daniel understood, and he waited. He didn't try to fix things with promises. He showed up, consistently, quietly, every day. He still came to the cafe. Sometimes he helped move a box or clean a table. Sometimes he just sat there sipping coffee and watching her with eyes that said more than his lips ever could. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Anna began to soften again. She smiled more freely. Her voice held warmth again. She started to trust, not just him but herself, her own heart. They weren't living a fairy tale. There were no flowers delivered in grand gestures, no public declarations. What they had was deeper, a quiet love built on time, truth, and healing. And then, one rainy Monday, Anna arrived at the cafe early, as she always did. But when she tried to unlock the door, something was wrong. The key didn't fit. The lock had been changed. Confused, she looked around, and then saw him. Daniel leaning against the wall holding an envelope, wearing a soft smile that trembled with emotion. "Good morning, Anna." She approached, heart racing. "What's going on?" He handed her the envelope. Inside, she found papers. Official ones. Ownership transfer documents. Daniel had bought the cafe and registered it in her name. She looked up, stunned. "Why would you do this?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because this is where I found peace. This is where I found you. And because this place is part of you. You changed my life, Anna. Now I want to change yours." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to do this for me. I know. That's why I am. Because you never asked. Because you never needed to prove anything. Because you gave me love. Before you knew I had anything to give back." She stood still, overwhelmed. It wasn't about the cafe. It was about the gesture, the meaning, for someone who had been overlooked so many times. To be seen, honored, chosen. It was too much to take in at once. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was declaring, "I see you. I believe in you. I choose you." She didn't say yes with words. She simply stepped into his arms and held him tight. There, on the rain-soaked sidewalk, wrapped in an embrace that spoke of healing and truth, Anna understood. This man didn't just love her. He respected her. And that kind of love is the kind that lasts. Not every love walks an easy path. Some, like Anna and Daniel's, have to prove their truth against the expectations of the world. After Daniel gifted her the cafe, Anna thought the hardest part was over. That kind of gesture doesn't come from impulse. It comes from depth, from intention. And they began living their love with a calmness neither of them had ever known. A love steady, present, and fully awake. But peace often stirs discomfort in others, especially when it breaks expectations. It didn't take long for word to reach Daniel's family. Not through him. He had no need to justify his choices. But through whispers, assumptions, and careful eyes watching too closely. His older sister was the first to call. Cold, direct, unyielding. "Have you lost your mind, Daniel? You're throwing everything away for a woman who just wants your money." Daniel didn't react with anger. "She doesn't even know how much I have, and still, she gave me more than anyone who's ever known every number in my bank account." There was silence on the other end, then a sigh, and then a disconnected line. But he knew it wouldn't end there. That weekend, at a quiet family dinner, one Anna wasn't invited to, the tension arrived at the table like an uninvited guest. A younger cousin, arrogant and loud, smirked across his wine glass and said, "Sounds like something from a movie, huh? The Millionaire and the Waitress. You sure this isn't just a midlife crisis?" Daniel set his fork down calmly. "This isn't a movie. And she's not a character. She's the most honest person I've ever known." The room fell into an uneasy silence. His mother, always cautious, asked softly, "She seems like a good woman, but aren't you moving too fast? Are you sure it's love, and not just gratitude?" Daniel stood, not out of anger, but out of respect for what he was protecting. "If you can't see her value, maybe it's because you've spent too long measuring people by what they have, instead of who they are." And he left. He returned home to find Anna at the cafe, closing up for the night. She looked at him and instantly sensed something was different. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded, then walked over to her and said quietly, "I think I lost a little bit of my family tonight, but I'm more sure than ever that I made the right choice." Anna didn't respond with words. She just pulled him into a long, firm hug. She knew what it cost him to stand by her, to choose her, to defend her in rooms where she'd never be welcome. But she also knew, love that costs nothing means nothing. And Daniel knew deep in his soul that he hadn't lost anything, because for the first time, he had found home. Not a house, not a family name, a soul that matched his. Time moved forward, like a calm river after a storm. The doubts were behind them. The silence transformed into presence, and in the quiet, something rare had taken root, a love that didn't need to be loud to be true. Anna kept working at the cafe, now as its owner, but nothing about her changed. She still wiped tables with care, still served each coffee with the same gentleness. The only difference now was in her eyes. They smiled even when her lips didn't. Daniel, though still deeply involved with his businesses, found time every single day to sit in that cafe, in that corner seat, watching her with a softness that only comes from certainty. The wedding came naturally. No spectacle, no flashing cameras, no elaborate guest list. They didn't want attention. They wanted truth. A small ceremony in a garden behind a simple country house, a place Daniel had bought as their retreat. The sun was low in the sky, spilling golden light as the two stood face to face. "I loved you before I even understood who you were," Daniel whispered, "and I choose to keep loving you, with my eyes open, my heart full, and my soul committed." Anna's voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. "You didn't choose me for what I had. You found me when all I had left was silence. And in that silence, I discovered the kind of love that heals." No grand speeches followed, just music low enough for whispers, homemade food, hugs that held stories. The next day, Anna opened the cafe as usual. She insisted, not because she had to, but because it grounded her. That cafe was not just where she worked, it was where everything began. And Daniel made it a point to say it almost every day. "This is where I found God, disguised as coffee and kindness." They built a home together, not one that dazzled from the outside, but one filled with warmth on the inside. A garden with wildflowers, quiet dinners, books by the window, laughter in the hallway. A home where prayer was spoken softly and gratitude filled the silence, because they'd learned something sacred. Love that lasts doesn't demand perfection. It requires presence. It values peace over performance, truth over status, intention over image. And that love, which once began with a single cup of coffee and a quiet act of grace, had become a haven, not just a home, a purpose. True love doesn't care about appearances. It cares about presence, about heart, about actions. God allowed her to serve a man who would one day serve her with his entire life. What seemed small was, in truth, the door to a great transformation. Because when you love sincerely, without agenda, without pretense, God handles the rest. He lifts, he restores, he surprises. And Anna came to understand. Everything she had lived through, everything that hurt, every silent tear, had been preparing her for a love that felt like a whispered answer to a long-forgotten prayer. Today, people still walk into that same cafe. They come for coffee, but they leave with something else. They leave having felt something sacred, because in that place, love was served, slowly, faithfully, one heart at a time. And if this story touched something deep inside you, there's another one waiting for you. It's the story of a man who paid a homeless woman to have his child, but what happened next was beyond anything either of them imagined. She had no home. He had no hope. But God had a plan no one saw coming. You'll find that story right here on the channel. And maybe it'll remind you that the greatest miracles often begin where the world only sees brokenness.